Story 1. The Permafrost Thaw. The body had been frozen for 63 years when it opened its eyes. I was 3 weeks into my contract with the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, cataloging erosion damage along the Koyukuk River, when I found the hand. February 14th, 2023. The temperature was minus 42 degrees, cold enough that my breath froze mid-air and fell as ice crystals. The permafrost cliff face had collapsed into the river, taking decades of accumulated soil with it. And there, jutting from the exposed wall like an accusation, were 5 gray fingers. I should have called it in immediately. Protocol demanded it. Instead, I spent 17 minutes carefully exposing the arm, then the shoulder, working with a brush meant for archaeological sites. The flesh was perfectly preserved, waxy and gray-blue, but intact. No decomposition. The cold had mummified whoever this was, turning them into a grotesque time capsule. The face emerged next. A woman, maybe 30 years old, with frost crystals in her eyelashes. Her mouth was open in a scream that never ended. She wore a floral dress, absurdly thin for Alaska, and no coat. Her skin had the texture of frozen meat. I was photographing her for the report when her chest moved. Not much, just a subtle rise, like someone taking a shallow breath after holding it too long. I convinced myself it was settling. Bodies do that, even frozen ones. Gases shift, ice cracks. There are rational explanations. I told myself this while my hands shook so badly I dropped my camera into the snow. Then she did it again. A definite, unmistakable breath. I stumbled backward, my boots sliding on the ice-slicked rocks. The woman's eyes remained closed, but her chest continued its slow, rhythmic movement. 1 breath every 40 seconds. I counted. I couldn't stop counting. At minus 42 degrees, with tissue frozen solid for over 6 decades, she was breathing. My satellite phone was in my pack. I should have used it. Instead, I stood there, watching, as color began seeping back into her gray flesh. It started at her core and radiated outward, pink spreading through frozen veins like dye in water. The frost on her eyelashes melted. Droplets ran down her cheeks like tears. I ran. I made it perhaps 50 yards before something made me look back. She was sitting up. The movement was wrong, too fluid, too controlled for someone who'd been frozen solid moments before. Her eyes were open now, and they tracked me with the precision of a predator watching prey. They were completely black, not just the pupils, the entire eye from edge to edge, like pools of oil reflecting nothing. "Help me," she said. Her voice was clear, unaffected by the temperature, carrying across the frozen river like she was standing next to me. "I'm so cold." The absurdity of the statement, she'd been frozen for 63 years, didn't seem to register with her. She stood, the floral dress clinging to her thawing body, bare feet on ice that should have flash-frozen her skin on contact. She didn't shiver, didn't show any sign of distress, except those words, repeated with mechanical precision. "I'm so cold. Help me. I'm so cold." I fumbled for my phone, nearly dropping it twice before getting it out. My fingers were too numb to work the screen properly. Behind me, I could hear her footsteps crunching in the snow, not hurried, patient. The steady pace of someone who knew their prey, had nowhere to go. The phone finally connected. Margaret, my supervisor, answered on the 3rd ring. "I found a body," I said, the words tumbling out too fast. "In the permafrost. Margaret, she's moving. She's alive." "Slow down, David. What's your location?" I gave her the coordinates, watching over my shoulder as the woman advanced. She'd covered 30 yards while I'd been fumbling with the phone. Her black eyes never blinked, never looked away from me. I'm sending a team, Margaret said. Can you tell me about the body? Female, maybe 30, wearing summer clothes. No coat. She's been frozen since... I checked my notes with shaking hands. Since 1960, based on the soil layers. Margaret. She woke up. She opened her eyes and started breathing, and now she's walking toward me. The silence on the other end lasted too long. David, you're experiencing hypothermia symptoms. Hallucinations are common at those temperatures. I need you to get somewhere warm and... I'm not hallucinating. The woman was 20 yards away now, close enough that I could see her lips moving, forming those same 3 sentences over and over. I'm so cold. Help me. I'm so cold. I hung up and ran. The emergency shelter was a half-mile east, a small cabin the DNR maintained for situations exactly like this. Except not like this. Nothing was like this. I made it there in 8 minutes, a time I'll never match again, fueled by pure terror. I slammed the door behind me and threw the bolt. The cabin had no windows. Just 4 walls, a propane heater, and supplies for 3 days. I fired up the heater and huddled next to it, listening to my ragged breathing gradually slow. Outside, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no voice calling out. Just the wind howling across the tundra. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Hypothermia, like Margaret said, the mind playing tricks. I'd seen a body, that part was real. But the rest? Impossible. People don't wake up after 63 years, frozen in permafrost. The scratching started at 3:47 a.m. Soft at first, fingernails on wood, then harder, more insistent. The door frame groaned under pressure it wasn't designed to withstand. I grabbed the satellite phone, but there was no signal inside the cabin's metal walls. I'd have to go outside to call for help. The scratching stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard her voice. Muffled by the door, but still clear. I'm so cold. Help me. I'm so cold. I didn't sleep. Didn't dare close my eyes. I sat with my back against the far wall, a flare gun in one hand and a knife in the other, watching the door. The scratching would start, continue for minutes or hours, time lost meaning, then stop. Her voice, always the same 3 sentences, never changing inflection or volume. Dawn came at 10:43 a.m. I knew because my watch alarm went off, a tinny beeping that sounded obscene in the stillness. The scratching had stopped an hour earlier. I waited another 30 minutes before approaching the door. The bolt slid back with a metallic click that seemed to echo forever. I eased the door open an inch. 2 inches, enough to see the area immediately outside. She was gone. The snow around the cabin was churned up, showing clear evidence of someone, something, pacing around the perimeter all night. The door frame was gouged with deep scratches, far deeper than fingernails should have been able to create. They looked like claw marks. I made it back to my truck and called Margaret from there. The helicopter arrived 2 hours later with a recovery team. They found the permafrost collapse site easily enough. They found the cavity where the body had been. They didn't find her. What they did find, buried in the soil layers around where she'd been frozen, were 17 other bodies. All women, all wearing summer dresses. All with their eyes open and mouths frozen in screams. The oldest dated back to 1912. None of them were the woman I'd seen. Margaret pulled me from field work, said I needed time to process the trauma. She didn't believe my story, thought I'd hallucinated the reanimation part, that the body had simply been dislodged when I was documenting it and rolled into the river. Her report listed it as a historical burial site disturbed by erosion. But 3 days after I found that first body, a hiker went missing near the Koyukuk River. They found him 4 days later, frozen solid despite above-zero temperatures. His eyes were black from edge to edge, His mouth was open like he'd been screaming. The medical examiner said it was unexplained rapid-onset hypothermia. She didn't mention the scratches on his arms, the defensive wounds that suggested he'd been trying to fight someone off. She didn't explain why his body temperature was 68 degrees when they found him, far too cold for someone who'd been dead less than a week. And she didn't acknowledge what the first responders reported, that when they initially approached the body, before they got close enough to confirm he was dead, they heard him speaking. 3 sentences, repeated over and over in a voice that didn't sound quite human. "I'm so cold. Help me. I'm so cold." I quit the DNR that week. Moved to Anchorage, as far from the interior as I could get while staying in Alaska. I told myself I'd be safe in the city, surrounded by people and lights and civilization. Last week, my neighbor knocked on my door at 2 a.m. I didn't recognize her at first. We'd only exchanged pleasantries a handful of times. But I recognized her eyes, black from edge to edge, reflecting the hallway light like pools of oil. "I'm so cold," she said, her voice flat and mechanical. "Help me. I'm so cold." I slammed the door and called the police. They found her wandering the street 3 blocks away, confused and disoriented. She had no memory of coming to my door. Her eyes were normal, brown, not black. The officers assured me she'd probably been sleepwalking. But when they took her temperature, it was 92 degrees. Mild hypothermia, they said. Strange for someone who'd been inside all night, but not impossible. I started researching. Historical records, missing persons, strange deaths. The pattern went back over a century. Every few years, someone would be found frozen solid in impossible circumstances. And before they died, witnesses reported them behaving strangely, speaking in monotone. Eyes described as dark or wrong. The oldest account I found was from 1876, a Russian explorer's journal, describing an encounter near what's now the Koyukuk River. He wrote about finding a woman frozen in the ice and how she'd thawed and followed his party for 3 days, always staying just out of rifle range, repeating phrases in a language he didn't recognize. On the 4th day, one of his men went missing. They found him frozen, eyes black, still breathing somehow. The explorer wrote that they left him there, too afraid to touch him. When they returned a week later with reinforcements, the body was gone. The journal's final entry, dated 2 weeks after the initial encounter. Yakov has taken ill. His eyes have darkened. He complains constantly of the cold, though we keep the fire blazing. I fear we brought something back with us, something that was meant to stay frozen. There were no further entries. The Russian expedition was listed as lost, all members presumed dead. Their bodies were never recovered. I found similar accounts: a gold rush prospector in 1898, a survey team in 1934, a family of homesteaders in 1962. Always the same pattern. Someone finds something in the permafrost, something wakes up, people start dying of impossible cold. And now, the permafrost is melting. Climate change is exposing things that have been frozen for thousands of years. Bacteria, viruses, and other things. Things that might not be bacteria or viruses at all. Last night I saw her, the original woman from the river. She was standing across the street from my apartment, wearing that same floral dress, bare feet on snow-covered pavement. Her black eyes found mine through my 3rd-story window. She raised one gray hand and waved. I'm writing this because I woke up this morning, and my apartment was 62 degrees, even though the thermostat was set to 75. My fingers are numb. My breath fogs in front of my face, and when I looked in the mirror, I noticed my eyes. They're not black yet, but they're darker than they were yesterday. And I'm so cold. God, I'm so cold. Story 2. The Dead Horse Frequency. The radio picked up the transmission at 3:17 a.m., and I knew immediately that something was wrong, because Channel 19 had been dead for 8 years. I was running a solo haul from Fairbanks to Deadhorse, 515 miles of the Dalton Highway in January, when every cell phone tower and radio repeater between me and the Arctic Ocean might as well have been decorative. But truckers still kept their CB radios on out of habit, monitoring Channel 19, even though it had been officially decommissioned in 2015 after some kind of technical failure no one ever properly explained to us. The voice that came through was a woman's, calm and measured, like she was reading a grocery list. "This is Station 7. We have a contamination breach. Repeat, Station 7 has experienced a contamination breach. All personnel should enact Protocol Exodus immediately." I grabbed the mic. "This is northbound on the Dalton, mile marker 281. Who is this? What station?" Static answered me for 30 seconds. Then, "Station 7, contamination breach, Protocol Exodus." The exact same words, same inflection, like a recording. I'd been driving the Dalton for 11 years, hauling equipment and supplies to the oil fields at Prudhoe Bay. I knew every facility, every outpost, every labeled structure between Fairbanks and the Arctic. There was no Station 7. The oil companies used names, not numbers. The research facilities were clearly marked. This was something else. The transmission repeated every 17 minutes for the next 2 hours. Always the same message. Always the same voice. At mile marker 315, I passed the point where I should have lost even the ghost of a signal on the old channel. The transmission got stronger. At mile marker 347, I found the road. It wasn't on any map. I'd driven this route 206 times, and I would have sworn under oath that there was nothing here but tundra and permafrost. But there it was, a gravel access road, well maintained, leading east into the darkness. A sign read, "Authorized personnel only, Station 7. I should have kept driving. I had a schedule to keep, a load that was worth $140,000, and a policy of not sticking my nose into places that said authorized personnel only. But that voice kept looping through my speakers, and the calm way she said contamination breach made my skin crawl. I turned onto the access road. The facility appeared after 3 miles, a cluster of prefabricated buildings arranged in a hexagonal pattern around a central structure. Lights were on in most of the windows, and a parking lot held 8 vehicles, all covered in snow. Everything looked normal except for one detail. The central building's door was open, and I could see into the lit interior. It was snowing inside the building. Not the wind blowing snow in through the door. It was snowing inside, in a closed environment, impossible white flakes falling from a ceiling I couldn't see. They accumulated on the floor, in drifts that glittered under fluorescent lights. I parked the truck and grabbed my flashlight and the .44 Magnum. I kept in the sleeper cab for bears. The temperature outside was -38. Inside the building, it was colder. My breath crystallized instantly, and the moisture in my nostrils froze. The interior snow crunched under my boots, not the soft crunch of fresh powder, but something harder, more crystalline. The flakes that fell on my jacket didn't melt. They stayed intact, perfect geometric structures that shouldn't have been able to form under these conditions. The woman's voice came from speakers mounted in the ceiling. "Station 7. Contamination breach. Protocol Exodus." I followed the sound deeper into the facility. The interior was a warren of corridors and laboratories, all showing signs of recent occupation. Coffee mugs sat on desks, still half full, the liquid frozen solid. Computer screens glowed with screensavers, coats hung on hooks. But no people. The snow got deeper as I moved toward the center. 6 inches, then a foot. then deep enough that I was wading through it, my boots sinking into impossible accumulation. The temperature continued to drop. -40, -50. Cold enough that my exposed skin burned. I found the first body in what looked like a control room. The man was frozen in a chair, hands still on a keyboard, eyes open and staring at a screen filled with scrolling text. The same message, repeated thousands of times. Exodus, 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 Exodus. Ice crystals grew from his skin like flowers, delicate fractal patterns spreading from his fingers and face. He wasn't dead. I saw his chest move, a breath so slow it took 40 seconds to complete. His eyes tracked toward me, the movement glacial but deliberate. "Help," he whispered, and frost formed in the air around his lips. Cold. So cold. I backed away, my hand tightening on the magnum. The man tried to stand, his frozen joints cracking like breaking ice. He made it halfway up before falling, shattering into pieces on the floor like a porcelain doll. But the pieces kept moving. His hand crawled toward me, fingers scraping against the floor, leaving trails in the snow. I ran. The facility was a maze, and the snow was everywhere now, falling so thick I could barely see 3 feet ahead. I passed more bodies, 7 in total, all frozen but still moving, still breathing those impossibly slow breaths. They reached for me as I passed, whispering about the cold in voices like wind through dead trees. I found the source in the central chamber. It was a well. A perfectly circular shaft drilled straight down into the permafrost, descending farther than my flashlight could reach. The walls were lined with instruments and sensors, and at the top, a complex drilling apparatus sat dormant. The snow was coming from the well, billowing up in columns of white. But it wasn't snow. Not really. I got close enough to see the individual flakes before my survival instinct kicked in and made me stop. They were too perfect, too geometric. Each one was identical, a complex pattern that looked almost technological, like microscopic circuit boards or crystallized code. They reminded me of snowflakes seen under a microscope, except these had structure that seemed intentional. A laptop sat open next to the well, still running. I checked the screen and wished I hadn't. It was a research log. Station 7 was a climate research facility, privately funded, studying permafrost melt. They'd been drilling core samples when they found something unexpected at a depth of 2,300 feet. A layer of ice that shouldn't have existed. Ice that predated the last ice age. Ice that contained something. The final log entry was dated January 8th, 2023. 6 days ago. We thawed sample 7-17 to analyze its composition. Dr. Wu Chen noticed the unusual crystalline structure immediately. The sample appears to be made up of geometric patterns that don't match any known form of ice. More concerningly, the sample continues to maintain its temperature despite being removed from refrigeration. Currently holding at -89 degrees Celsius in room temperature environment. Update 1423. The sample is generating its own cold. We've moved it to a sealed chamber, but the temperature is dropping throughout the facility. -30 degrees in the main lab. Systems are beginning to fail. Update 1647. Whatever this is, it's not natural ice. It's replicating. Growing. The sealed chamber is completely filled with the crystalline structures, and they're spreading into the ventilation system. 3 staff members are showing symptoms of severe hypothermia despite wearing proper cold gear. Dr. Yates's body temperature has dropped to 31 degrees. She's still conscious, still moving. But her eyes, something's wrong with her eyes. Update 1812. We can't stop it. The structures are in the air. We're breathing them. Everyone's core temperature is dropping. Martinez shattered his finger, just touched a door handle, and it broke off his hand like frozen wood. He didn't even scream, just stared at it. This is my final entry. Whatever we found in that ice has been frozen for at least 300,000 years. We should have left it there. It doesn't want to be warm. It doesn't want to melt. I think it's been waiting. I think it wants to make everything like it was. Everything cold, everything frozen. If you find this, don't touch anything. Don't breathe the air. And whatever you do, don't let this spread outside the facility. We've set Protocol Exodus to broadcast on all emergency frequencies. Maybe someone will understand. Maybe they'll know how to... The entry ended there. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, shuffling, accompanied by the creak of frozen joints. I turned to see all 7 bodies I'd passed crowding into the chamber, their movements synchronized, mechanical. The ice crystals had spread across their skin, turning them into geometric sculptures of frost and flesh. They spoke in unison, their voices creating a harmony that sounded like wind. You have to stay, can't let it spread, have to keep it contained, have to stay cold. I shot the nearest one, Dr. Yates, according to her name tag. The bullet passed through her chest, shattering frozen tissue, but she kept walking. They all kept walking, backing me toward the well. That's when I realized they weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to keep me from leaving. I dodged past them and ran. The facility was disintegrating, walls cracking from the extreme cold, ceiling tiles falling as the support structure failed. The snow, the crystalline structures, filled the air so thick I was breathing it in, feeling it coat my throat and lungs with frost. My truck was where I left it. I turned the key, and the engine caught on the 3rd try, Detroit diesel roaring to life. I didn't look back as I gunned it down the access road, tires throwing up snow, the facility's lights fading behind me. I made it to the Dalton Highway and kept driving north. I had to reach Dead Horse, had to tell someone, had to warn them. My hands were numb on the steering wheel. My breath was fogging, even though the cab heater was running full blast. The thermometer read 72 degrees inside the truck, but I could see frost forming on the inside of the windshield. I checked the rearview mirror and saw my eyes in the reflection. The whites were clouding over, turning opaque like cataracts made of ice. The radio crackled. Channel 19, still broadcasting. Station 7, contamination breach, Protocol Exodus. Except now there was a second voice, my voice joining the woman's in perfect synchronization. Station 7, contamination breach, Protocol Exodus. I didn't remember speaking. I reached Dead Horse at 11:43 a.m., 7 hours later than scheduled. The loading supervisor found me in the truck, engine still running, heater blasting. He said my skin was blue. Said my core temperature was 87 degrees. Said it was a miracle I was alive. They airlifted me to Fairbanks, to the hospital, where I spent 3 days in intensive care while they slowly warmed me back to normal. Severe hypothermia, they said. I was lucky. Another hour and I would have died. I told them about Station 7. They nodded sympathetically and said I'd hallucinated. Hypothermia does that, they said. Creates vivid false memories. There was no facility at mile marker 347. They checked satellite imagery, just empty tundra. But when they released me, a man in a government suit was waiting in the lobby. He didn't introduce himself or show identification, just handed me a document. It was a non-disclosure agreement, very specific, very detailed, prohibiting me from discussing anything related to Station 7, unauthorized facilities on the Dalton Highway, or unusual radio transmissions on decommissioned channels. Violation would result in federal prosecution and a minimum of 20 years in prison. I signed it. That was 8 months ago. I haven't driven the Dalton since, haven't touched a CB radio. But 3 weeks ago, a friend who still runs that route called me at 2 a.m. You remember telling me about that weird station you found? He asked. His voice was shaking. The one that wasn't on the maps? I don't know what you're talking about, I said, thinking about the NDA. Right, okay. Well, hypothetically, if someone was driving past mile marker 347, and hypothetically they saw an access road that shouldn't be there, and hypothetically they heard a woman's voice on Channel 19 talking about a contamination breach, what would you tell them to do? I was quiet for a long time. Finally, I tell them to drive past it. Don't stop. Don't investigate. And if they're feeling cold, if their truck's heater isn't keeping up, if frost is forming on the windows, if their hands are going numb, I tell them to pull over and call for help immediately. And what if, he said slowly, hypothetically they already went inside? What if they already saw things? Then I tell them to get somewhere warm and pray. He hung up. I tried calling back, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Still does, 3 weeks later. His wife filed a missing persons report. Last confirmed sighting was at mile marker 353, his truck abandoned on the side of the road, engine running, heater on full blast. The truck's interior was completely frosted over. Ice covered every surface. And on Channel 19, the radio was still broadcasting. 3 voices now. The woman, me, and my friend, all speaking in perfect unison. Station 7, contamination breach, protocol exodus. I'm writing this because 2 days ago, I saw the access road, in Fairbanks, in the middle of the city. A gravel road leading off a residential street, a sign reading authorized personnel only, Station 7, appearing where there should have been a dental office. The road is spreading. The facility is spreading. Whatever they found in that ice, it's not staying contained. And every night, when I try to sleep, I can feel it in my lungs. Cold, getting colder. My body temperature has been dropping. 0.2 degrees per week. I'm at 95.8 now. Normal is 98.6. The doctors say it's impossible. Say their thermometers must be malfunctioning. But I know better. I'm becoming like the others. Becoming a warning. Another voice added to the broadcast. And I'm so cold. God, I'm so cold. Story 3. The Seward Merge. My wife came back wrong, and it took me 3 days to notice. Sarah died on December 19th, 2022, when her Subaru hit black ice on the Seward Highway and went off the cliff near milepost 73. The car fell 214 feet into Turnagain Arm. They found it 4 days later at low tide, crushed like a beer can, filled with frozen seawater. They didn't find Sarah. The Coast Guard searched for a week. Divers went down in water so cold they could only stay under for 12 minutes at a time. But Turnagain Arm has tides that rise and fall 40 feet, currents that can drag a body out to the Gulf of Alaska in hours. They said she was gone. They said we should prepare for a funeral without a body. We held the service on January 8th. 147 people came. Sarah's mother collapsed during the eulogy. I stood at the front of the church and said words I didn't remember afterward, looking out at a sea of faces I couldn't focus on, because the moment I did, the reality would set in. I drove home alone to our house in Anchorage, to the place where everything still smelled like her shampoo, and our daughter's toys still cluttered the living room floor. Madison was with Sarah's parents. I couldn't face her yet. Couldn't explain why Mommy wasn't coming home. I was sitting in the dark at 11:37 p.m., working through a bottle of Jameson, when I heard the front door open. "James," Sarah's voice, clear, real. "I'm home." I thought I was hallucinating, grief and alcohol creating exactly what I wanted to hear. But when I turned on the lights, she was standing in the entryway, wearing the same clothes she'd worn the day of the accident, jeans and a blue parka. Her hair was wet, hanging in dark tangles around her face. "Where have you been?" she asked, shaking off her coat. "I've been trying to call. My phone died." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. She walked into the kitchen like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been dead for 3 weeks, like we hadn't just held her funeral 8 hours ago. "Sarah," my voice came out strangled. "How? We thought—" She turned, and her face showed confusion. "Thought what? I just had some car trouble. Is Madison asleep?" "Madison's at your parents' house. Sarah, you were in an accident. Your car went off the Seward Highway. You've been missing for 3 weeks." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. 3 weeks. "James, I had a fender bender this morning. I walked to the nearest gas station and got a tow." "What are you talking about?" "This morning." She thought it was December 19th. She had no memory of the time between the accident and now. I should have called someone. Police, hospital, Sarah's parents. But she was home. She was alive. That's all that mattered in that moment. I convinced myself she had amnesia, that the trauma of the crash had caused some kind of dissociative episode. We could figure it out tomorrow. Tonight, I just needed to hold her. We went to bed, and she fell asleep immediately, her breathing even and calm. I lay awake watching her, looking for something wrong. There wasn't anything. She looked exactly like Sarah, felt like Sarah when I touched her skin. Smelled like Sarah, that combination of vanilla body wash and the lavender detergent she always used. Except she was cold, not freezing, but cool to the touch, like she'd been outside too long. The wrongness started showing itself in small ways. The next morning she made coffee but didn't drink any. Just carried a mug around, occasionally lifting it to her lips, but never actually swallowing. When I asked if something was wrong with it, she looked confused and said it tasted fine. She forgot Madison's birthday. Our daughter, who she'd given birth to, who she'd raised for 4 years. When I mentioned we should pick Madison up from her parents, Sarah asked, "Who's Madison?" The memory came back 30 seconds later. She laughed it off as a brain fog moment. Said she was probably still recovering from the accident. But the look on her face during those 30 seconds, the genuine confusion, like she'd never heard the name before, made my stomach turn. Little things kept appearing. She put her shoes on the wrong feet and didn't notice until I pointed it out. She tried to unlock the front door with her car keys 3 times before realizing her mistake. She asked where the bathroom was in our house, the house we'd lived in for 6 years. And she was always cold. I set the thermostat to 78 degrees, and she wore sweaters and complained about the temperature. When I touched her arm, her skin felt like it had been refrigerated. On the second day, I called her cell phone, the one that had been recovered from the car, destroyed by salt water. It was sitting in a police evidence bag at the station. It rang from inside our bedroom. I followed the sound and found an identical phone charging on Sarah's nightstand. Same model, same case, same crack in the screen protector she'd gotten last July. When I picked it up, it unlocked to her face. Her actual biometric data worked on this phone that shouldn't exist. I scrolled through the messages. They were all from me. Texts I'd sent over the past 3 weeks. Desperate messages asking where she was, begging her to call, finally accepting that she was gone. All marked as read, all received on this impossible phone. "What are you doing?" Sarah stood in the doorway, and I hadn't heard her approach. "This phone," I said. "Where did you get this phone? Your real phone is at the police station." She looked at the device in my hand like she was seeing it for the first time. Then, "I've always had that phone. Sarah, you died. Your car is at the bottom of Turnagain Arm. This phone shouldn't exist." "Stop saying that." Her voice went flat, emotionless. "I didn't die. I'm right here." "Then where were you for 3 weeks?" She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. She stood there, silent, her expression frozen in that about-to-speak moment. 30 seconds passed. A minute. She didn't blink, didn't move. Just stood, mouth open, eyes fixed on something past my shoulder. Sarah. I waved my hand in front of her face. No reaction. Then she blinked, and life flooded back into her features. What were we talking about? I felt my reality starting to crack. This wasn't amnesia. This wasn't trauma. Something was fundamentally wrong with the person standing in front of me. That night I pretended to sleep and watched her. She lay motionless for 3 hours, not moving, not shifting position. Her breathing was too regular, too measured. Exactly 15 seconds between breaths, like a machine. At 2:33 a.m., she got up and walked downstairs. I followed, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice. She went to the sliding glass door that led to our back deck and stood there, facing the glass, not moving. I watched for 20 minutes. She just stood, staring at her reflection, utterly still. Then she started to glitch. There's no better word for it. Her reflection in the glass didn't quite match her movements. When she tilted her head left, the reflection tilted right. When she raised her hand, the reflection stayed still. And sometimes, just for a fraction of a second, the reflection showed someone different. Someone with Sarah's face, but wrong proportions, wrong angles, like looking at her through a distorted lens. I must have made a sound because she turned. In the moment she rotated, I saw both versions, the Sarah standing in my living room and the Sarah reflected in the glass. And they didn't occupy the same space. The reflection was 3 feet to the left of where she actually stood. "You should be asleep," she said. "What are you?" The question came out before I could stop it. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions too fast to track: confusion, fear, anger, sadness, like she was cycling through emotional responses, trying to find the right one. She settled on hurt. "James, you're scaring me. I'm your wife. My wife drowned 3 weeks ago. I'm right here." Her voice rose, taking on a desperate edge. "I'm real. I'm Sarah." "Then explain the phone. Explain the amnesia. Explain why you're cold all the time and why you don't need to eat or sleep." She couldn't. She stood there, hands trembling, tears running down her face. Except the tears were wrong. Too viscous, too clear. They looked like water, just water, not the slightly sticky consistency of real tears. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I remember drowning. I remember the water filling the car, and I couldn't get out, and it was so cold. And then I was walking up to our house, and no time had passed. 3 weeks just gone." "What do you remember about the drowning?" "Everything. The impact, the way the windshield shattered, water coming in so fast. I tried to open the door, but the pressure was too much. My lungs burned. And then I was underwater, outside the car, sinking. It was dark. So dark. And cold. And then," she closed her eyes. "And then I saw myself. Another me, swimming down toward me, reaching out. She looked exactly like me, but there was something wrong with her face. Like it was my face, but the features weren't quite in the right places. She grabbed my hand and—" Sarah stopped, opened her eyes. They were different now. The pupils were dilated too wide, showing too much black. "And then I was here," she finished, walking up to the house, like nothing happened. I pulled out my phone and called 911. Sarah didn't try to stop me, just stood there, watching, as I reported an intruder in my house. When I hung up, she smiled, a sad, broken expression. "They won't be able to help," she said. "I'm not an intruder. I'm Sarah. I have her memories, her voice, her DNA. I am her in every way that matters. Except you're not." No, she agreed. I'm not. The police arrived in 11 minutes. 2 officers, both of whom had been at the funeral. They recognized Sarah immediately. Recognition followed by shock, followed by confusion. One of them actually stumbled backward. Sarah was cooperative, answering their questions calmly. She provided her social security number, her driver's license number, details about her life that only the real Sarah would know. They ran her fingerprints through their portable scanner. The prints matched Sarah's on file. They took us both to the station, where Sarah submitted to more tests. DNA swab, more fingerprints, photographs. Everything came back confirming she was Sarah Mitchell, my wife, who had been declared missing and presumed dead 21 days earlier. But in the middle of her interview, she froze again, just stopped mid-sentence, her face going slack, eyes unfocused. The detective interviewing her waved his hand in front of her face, called her name. No response. She stayed frozen for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Then she blinked and continued her sentence exactly where she'd left off, not acknowledging the gap. They released us at 6:47 a.m. No crime had been committed. No explanation existed. The detective assigned to her case said she must have survived somehow, suffered hypothermia and amnesia, and was now recovering. The medical evaluation showed she was physically healthy, despite her low body temperature. We drove home in silence. I kept glancing at her, looking for signs of whatever she really was. She stared out the window, tears, those 2 clear tears, running down her face. "I'm sorry," she said as we pulled into the driveway. "I don't want to be this. I want to be her. I want to be Sarah. I have all her memories. I love you the way she loved you. I love Madison. I remember her first steps, her first word. I remember our wedding and the way you proposed, and the first time we said, 'I love you.' All of it is real to me. But you're not her. I don't know what I am." She turned to face me, and in the morning light I could see it. The subtle wrongness. Her features were too symmetrical, her skin too smooth. Like looking at a high-definition photograph instead of a real person. But I'm here, and she's not. Don't you want to believe I'm her? Wouldn't that be easier? I wanted to say no, wanted to tell her to leave, to go back to wherever she came from. But the truth was, yes. God, yes. I wanted my wife back so desperately that I was willing to accept this thing wearing her face. We went inside. I made breakfast. She pretended to eat it. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, playing house, both of us knowing it was a lie, but neither willing to acknowledge it. That was 4 months ago. Sarah, the thing that looks like Sarah, is still here. We picked up Madison, and she accepted her mother without question. Kids don't notice the subtle wrongness the way adults do. Sarah makes dinner every night and scrapes most of it into the trash when she thinks I'm not looking. She goes to work at her old job and apparently performs her duties well enough that no one has complained. She sleeps exactly 6 hours per night, not a minute more or less, lying perfectly still the entire time. And every night at 2:33 a.m., she gets up and stands in front of the sliding glass door, staring at her reflection. I don't follow her anymore. I don't want to see the way her reflection fails to match her movements, or catch another glimpse of that other face beneath hers. Last week, I drove out to Turnagain Arm. Low tide. I walked along the shore where they found Sarah's car, looking at the rocks and mud, and I found something. A phone. Sarah's phone. Same model, same case, same cracked screen protector. Corroded by salt water, but unmistakably hers. Which means the phone charging on her nightstand, the one that receives my messages, came from somewhere else. I threw the corroded phone back into the water. Because here's the thing I've realized. I don't care. The real Sarah is gone. This version, whatever it is close enough. She loves Madison. She holds my hand at night. She laughs at my jokes. If I squint and don't look too closely at the wrongness, I can pretend. Sometimes I catch her staring at me with an expression I can't quite read. Sometimes she opens her mouth to say something, and the words don't come. And she freezes, stuck in that moment of almost speaking. Sometimes her reflection shows that other face, the one with features in wrong places. But she's here, and Madison is happy, and maybe that's enough. Except last night, Madison came to me after Sarah put her to bed. My daughter was crying, clutching her stuffed bear. "Daddy," she whispered, "who's that lady in Mommy's room?" "What lady, sweetie?" "The one who looks like Mommy but isn't. She stands in the mirror and watches. She's angry that someone's wearing her face." I told Madison she had a nightmare. Tucked her back in. Checked Sarah's room and found my wife asleep in bed, breathing in those 2 regular intervals. But in the full-length mirror on the closet door, Sarah's reflection was standing. While the Sarah in bed lay horizontal, the reflection stood vertical, staring out from the glass with eyes that held nothing but rage. I don't go into that room anymore, and I'm starting to wonder, if the thing in my house isn't Sarah, then what's in the mirror? Story 4. The Juneau Fold. The building folded at 4:47 p.m. on March 3rd, 2023, and I was the only one who saw it happen because everyone else was looking at their phones. I was walking down Franklin Street in downtown Juneau, heading to the liquor store before it closed, when the Baranoff Hotel just creased, like someone had taken a photograph of it and bent the paper. The north corner folded inward at an impossible angle, the brick and glass compressing into a space half their original volume without making a sound. I stopped walking. A woman bumped into me, muttered an apology, and kept going. She'd walked past the hotel without noticing that its geometry was now fundamentally wrong. I stared at it for 2 full minutes. The fold remained, a corner of a 3-story building occupying the same space as a corner of a 2-story building, both somehow existing simultaneously. Windows on the 3rd floor were now level with windows on the 2nd. A fire escape ended mid-air, its bottom stairs occupying the same physical location as a brick wall. People walked past, into the hotel, out of it. No one reacted to the impossible architecture. I took out my phone and snapped a picture. The photo showed a normal building, no fold, no geometric impossibility. Just the Baranoff Hotel, as it had always been. I walked closer, reached out and touched the folded section. My hand passed through the overlap without resistance, feeling both the cold glass of a window and the rough texture of brick simultaneously. The sensations existed in the same space, overlaid on each other like a double-exposed photograph. That's when I noticed the man. He was standing inside the fold, in the space where the 3rd floor and 2nd floor occupied the same location. Half his body was on one floor, half on another, and he looked directly at me with eyes that held perfect awareness. He mouthed 3 words. "Don't look up." I looked up. The sky above Juneau was folded. Not clouds or weather, the actual sky. I could see multiple layers of atmosphere stacked on top of each other, each one showing a different time of day. Morning light bled through afternoon. Gray bled through evening dark, all visible simultaneously if I unfocused my eyes the right way. And there were things moving in the folds. Shapes that existed in the overlapped spaces, sliding between layers of reality like parasites between layers of skin. I started walking. Fast. I made it 3 blocks before I realized the buildings around me were all folded. Not dramatically, just slight creases, small impossibilities. A doorway that was somehow both open and closed, a car parked in a space that was also occupied by a street sign, a tree growing through a bench that was also completely intact. No one else saw it. People walked through the folded spaces without noticing, their bodies passing through overlapped matter like it wasn't there. I went home and didn't sleep. I researched folded space, geometric anomalies, dimensional overlap. Nothing. I found fringe theories about the universe being a hologram, mathematical proofs about higher dimensions, but nothing that matched what I was seeing. The folds spread. By the next morning, half of Juneau was folded. Buildings overlapped with other buildings. Streets curved into themselves. I watched a woman walk into a coffee shop that was also a dry cleaner, both businesses somehow operating in the same space, neither aware of the other. I could see both, could see the overlap, and the things living in the folds were getting bolder. They looked like shadows at first, dark spots in the corners of vision that skittered away when you looked directly at them. But they had substance in the folded spaces, physical forms that existed in the overlap between realities. I saw one crawl out of a folded section of wall, its body half in one dimension, half in another, reaching for a man walking past. It touched his shoulder. He didn't react, but his shadow split in two, one shadow falling normally, the other falling at a 90-degree angle to the first. Wrong. Geometrically impossible. The man walked away, oblivious, now casting two shadows that disagreed on which direction was down. I tried warning people, grabbed a woman and pointed at the folded building in front of us, explaining what I could see. She looked at me like I was insane. When I insisted, when I tried to make her understand, she called the police. Officer Delacroix responded to the call. He listened to my story with the patient expression of someone who dealt with mental health crises before. He was kind, sympathetic, and he didn't believe a single word. "Mr. Patterson," he said, "when's the last time you slept?" I couldn't remember. 2 days, 3. "I think you should talk to someone," he continued. "There's a crisis center on." I pointed past his shoulder. "Your car is folded." He turned. His patrol car looked normal to him. To me, it was compressed, the front and rear occupying overlapping space, the vehicle somehow both 15 feet long and 8 feet long simultaneously. "Mr. Patterson, look at the antenna. Please, just look at the antenna." He humored me. The antenna was folded in half, but also straight, both states existing at once. From certain angles, you could see both configurations, the metal rod bent and unbent simultaneously. Delacroix stared at it for 30 seconds. Then, that's weird. Must be the light." He couldn't see it. The fold was too subtle, but he saw something off, something his brain immediately rationalized away. I went to the hospital. Voluntary admission. I thought maybe I was having a psychotic break, that the folds were hallucinations. The psychiatrist was a woman named Dr. O. Chen, who listened carefully and asked detailed questions about what I was seeing. "The interesting thing," she said, making notes, "is the consistency of your hallucinations. Usually, visual hallucinations are ephemeral, changing. Yours remain stable. You see the same folds in the same places. Because they're real. Have you considered that you might be experiencing a rare form of prosopometamorphopsia? It's a condition where visual processing errors make you see distortions that aren't." The wall behind her folded, a slow, deliberate crease, the surface bending inward like paper. A poster advertising depression medication compressed into the fold, the smiling woman's face now occupying the same space as a fire alarm. "There," I pointed. "Do you see that?" Dr. Chen turned. "See what?" One of those shadow things emerged from the fold, its form sliding between dimensions, and reached for her. Its touch left no mark, made no sound, but I watched her shadow split into 3 distinct projections, each falling at a different angle. "Mr. Patterson, I'm going to prescribe your shadow," I interrupted. "Look at your shadow." She looked down. 3 shadows, clear as day, spreading from her feet in geometrically impossible directions. She stared at them for 10 seconds. "The lighting in here is terrible," she said finally. "Maintenance has been promising to fix it for months." She saw them, saw the impossible shadows, and her brain rejected the information so completely that she manufactured a rational explanation without hesitation. "They kept me for 72 hours. Observation, medication, therapy. The hospital was heavily folded, entire wings overlapping, patient rooms occupying the same space as supply closets. I could see nurses walking through 2 floors simultaneously, their bodies split between dimensions, and none of them noticed. The things in the folds were everywhere now. They crawled through the overlapped spaces, feeding on something I couldn't identify. Wherever they touched, the folds deepened, spread. I watched one touch a wall, and the wall folded again, creating a new overlap, a new space for more of them to occupy. They were using people as anchors. The man with 2 shadows now had 5. A nurse walking past had shadows spreading from her body like spider legs, each one pointing to a different gravitational source. A patient in the common room cast a shadow that formed a perfect cube around him, a 3-dimensional shadow that shouldn't be possible. On the 3rd day, Dr. V. Chen released me with a prescription for antipsychotics and a follow-up appointment. I didn't fill the prescription. The pills wouldn't fix this. This wasn't in my head. I went to the library and found books on geometry, physics, dimensions. I found one reference that made me stop breathing. A research paper from 1973 about theoretical dimensional overlap. The author theorized that our 3-dimensional space might occasionally intersect with 4-dimensional space, creating folds where matter from both dimensions occupied the same location. The paper had been withdrawn from publication after 3 months, no explanation given. The author's name was listed as Dr. Helena Vasquez, affiliated with the University of Alaska. I tracked her down. She was 83 years old, living in a nursing home in Sitka. I took the ferry over and found her in a private room, staring out the window at mountains that were folded so severely they appeared to exist in 2 locations simultaneously. "You can see them," she said when I entered. Not a question, a statement. "The folds. Yes, they're everywhere now." Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. "They started in 1971. Small ones, barely noticeable. A corner of a building, a street sign. I was the only one who saw them. I tried to warn people. They thought I was insane." "What causes them?" "The universe is collapsing," she said simply. "Not catastrophically. Slowly. Like a tent when you remove the poles one by one. 4-dimensional space is folding down into 3-dimensional space. In 100 years, maybe less, our entire reality will be compressed into 2 dimensions. Then 1. Then nothing. That's impossible. You've seen the folds. You know it's not." I sat down, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Why can only some people see them?" "I don't know. Some quirk of visual processing, perhaps. Or maybe we're the ones who are broken, seeing something we're not meant to see. Does it matter? Can it be stopped?" Dr. Vasquez laughed, a bitter sound. "How do you stop the universe from collapsing? It's physics, entropy. Everything falls apart eventually. We're just aware enough to watch it happen. Those things in the folds are from 4-dimensional space. They're probably equivalent to bacteria, simple organisms that exist in higher dimensions. They're feeding on the collapse, accelerating it. Every time they touch our reality, they create new folds." She turned from the window to look at me. You've seen the shadows. Yes. The more shadows a person has, the more folded they're becoming. Eventually, they'll collapse entirely, their three-dimensional form compressed into 2 dimensions. Then one, then gone. How many shadows do you have? She smiled sadly and stood up. The afternoon sun streaming through the window created her shadow on the wall. Except it wasn't one shadow. It was hundreds, maybe thousands, spreading from her body in every direction, a corona of darkness that defied every law of physics. I've been collapsing for 52 years, she said. I'm almost done. Another month, maybe 2. And then I'll fold completely, and no one will remember I existed because I'll have been compressed into a space so small that I never had volume in the first place. I looked at my own shadow. 2. Just 2. One falling normally, one at a 40-degree angle. I was in the early stages. Everyone gets them eventually, Dr. Vasquez continued. You just see it happening because you can perceive the folds. Everyone else in Juneau has multiple shadows now. They just don't notice because their brains refuse to process the information. I returned to Juneau that night. The ferry crossing took 4 hours, and I spent it watching the water, looking for folds. I found them. The ocean's surface was creased in places, waves folding back on themselves, water existing in overlapping states. Juneau was 70% folded now. Buildings were compressed into impossible configurations, entire city blocks overlapping, existing in the same space. I could navigate it only by focusing on one layer at a time, following one version of the street while ignoring the others. The shadow creatures were massive now. Dozens of them, visible even in daylight, sliding through the folded spaces. They looked almost solid, their 4-dimensional forms casting 3-dimensional shadows that moved independently of their bodies. I went to the police station and demanded to see Officer Delacroix. He remembered me, approached cautiously. Mr. Patterson, are you? Count your shadows. What? Your shadows. Count them. He looked down. 7 distinct shadows spread from his feet, each pointing to a different light source that didn't exist. He stared at them. I watched his face cycle through confusion, fear, and then the inevitable rationalization. Weird trick of the light, he said, but his voice shook. It's not. You're folding. We all are. Look at the building across the street. He looked. The courthouse was folded so severely it was nearly flat, a 3-story building compressed into something that appeared 2-dimensional from certain angles. That's not. You see it now. Delacroix put his hand on his gun, a reflexive gesture. What's happening? The universe is collapsing. 4-dimensional space folding into 3-dimensional space. We can see it. Most people can't. That's insane. Look at your shadows. He looked again. This time he really saw them. 7 impossible shadows spreading from his body in 7 different directions. His hand tightened on his gun. How do we stop it? We don't. We watch it happen. I left him standing there, staring at his shadows, his worldview cracking apart. That was 6 months ago. Juneau is 95% folded now. The entire city exists in overlapped space, buildings compressed into the same locations as other buildings, streets curving back on themselves in loops that violate every law of geometry. I can navigate it because I understand the folds, can see which layer I'm on, but everyone else moves through it in a daze, their brains struggling to process the impossible geography. Most people have dozens of shadows now. A few have hundreds. They're collapsing, compressing into lower dimensions, and they don't know it because their minds refuse to accept what's happening. I have 23 shadows. I can feel it happening. A strange sensation like my body is being compressed, squeezed into a space smaller than I should fit. Sometimes I reach for objects, and my hand passes through them because I'm not quite in the same dimension anymore. Dr. Vasquez died 3 weeks ago. I went to her funeral. Only 5 people attended, and by the end of the service, I was the only one who remembered she'd existed. She'd collapsed completely, folded down past one dimension into 0, and reality retroactively adjusted to erase her. I'm writing this because I'm at 18% collapse, according to my calculations. Another month, maybe 6 weeks, and I'll fold completely. And when I do, I'll vanish from memory, from photographs, from records. I'll have never existed. But before that happens, I want someone to know, to understand. The folds are everywhere now, not just Juneau. I've seen reports from Sitka, from Ketchikan, from Anchorage, always dismissed as optical illusions, as camera glitches, as lighting tricks. But they're real. The collapse is spreading. In 50 years, maybe less, Alaska will be completely folded. Then the rest of the world. And no one will notice because our brains are evolved to reject information that doesn't fit our model of reality. We'll compress into 2 dimensions, then 1, then 0, and every step of the way, we'll rationalize it as something normal. The shadow creatures are getting larger. They're barely hiding in the folds anymore, crawling openly through the streets, their 4-dimensional forms casting massive shadows that swallow buildings. People walk through them without seeing. I'm sitting in my apartment, watching my 23 shadows spread across the walls, waiting for the 24th. When it comes, I'll know I'm past the halfway point. The building across the street just folded again. It's flat now, a photograph of a building instead of an actual building, no thickness, no depth. But people are still going in and out of it, somehow existing in 2-dimensional space without realizing they've lost a dimension. My 24th shadow just appeared. I can feel myself getting thinner. Story 5. The Valdez Current. The fish were swimming backward, and that's when Captain Reeves knew we were in the wrong water. I'd signed onto the Arctic Horizon for a 3-week fishing run out of Valdez, processing boat work that paid $900 a day and required nothing but a strong stomach and the ability to gut salmon for 14 hours straight. March 17th, 2023. Water temperature 38 degrees. Seas running 4 to 6 feet. We were 63 miles offshore when Reeves cut the engines at 4:17 p.m. and called everyone to the bridge. "Someone tell me what the hell I'm looking at," he said, pointing at the fish finder. The screen showed a massive school below us, thousands of fish, maybe tens of thousands. But their movement pattern was wrong. Instead of the chaotic, organic flow of a normal school, these fish were moving in perfect synchronization, all swimming in the exact same direction at the exact same speed. Backward, not turning around. Actually swimming backward, tail first, like someone had reversed a video. "Glitch," suggested Miller, our chief engineer. Reeves shook his head. "I'm seeing it on 3 different systems: sonar, fish finder, and depth scanner, all showing the same thing." I looked over the rail. The water was wrong too. The waves were moving against the wind, swells rolling south when the breeze was blowing north. And the color, instead of the normal gray-green of the North Pacific, it was darker, almost black, like we were looking at water from much deeper. "We're in a current," I said. "There's no current here." Reeves pulled up the charts. "This is open water, nothing but ocean for 200 miles. But I could feel it. The Arctic horizon was drifting, not from wind or waves, but from something pulling us. A current that shouldn't exist, dragging us south-southwest at approximately 3 knots. Reeves tried to fire up the engines. They turned over, roared to life, then died. He tried again. Same result. On the 3rd attempt, the engine wouldn't even turn over. "Miller, get down there and... Captain." Our deckhand, Torres, was pointing behind us. "What is that?" The water we'd traveled through was different now. Where we'd been moments ago, the ocean was normal, gray-green, choppy, regular waves. But ahead of us, in the direction we were drifting, the water was that deep black, smooth as glass, and the fish were swimming backward. We were drifting from normal water into wrong water, and the boundary between them was sharp as a knife. "Everyone get a survival suit on," Reeves ordered. "Now." We scrambled. I got mine on in 90 seconds, the neoprene tight against my skin, the fear making my hands shake. The Arctic horizon was 68 feet long, steel hull, built to handle North Pacific storms. But Reeves' voice had the tone of a man who'd seen something that scared him, and he'd been fishing these waters for 27 years. We crossed the boundary at 4:31 p.m. The change was immediate. The boat's drift stopped, and we started moving backward. Not drifting, actively reversing, like the Arctic horizon was a car in reverse gear, traveling stern first through water that had become smooth as a mirror. "Engines," Reeves shouted. Miller hit the starter. Nothing. He tried the backup. Nothing. Both diesels were completely dead, as if they'd never existed. The water around us was full of fish now, all swimming backward in perfect formation. Salmon mostly, but also halibut, cod, species that had no business swimming together. They moved like they were being rewound, their movements jerky, unnatural. Torres threw up over the side. The vomit fell toward the water, then reversed direction mid-fall and came back up, returning to his mouth in a display that made my brain hurt to watch. "Jesus Christ," Miller whispered. The Arctic horizon picked up speed. 5 knots backward, then 8, then 12. We were traveling in reverse at a speed our engines couldn't match, pulled by a current that was also moving backward, through water that reflected nothing. Reeves grabbed the radio. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the Arctic horizon. Position." He checked the GPS. The screen was blank. "GPS is down. We are experiencing mechanical failure and are being pulled by an unknown current, requesting immediate assistance." Static answered him. He tried every channel. More static, except on channel 16, where underneath the static we could hear something that sounded like voices speaking in reverse. The fog came at 4:47 p.m. It rolled in from nowhere, thick white mist that reduced visibility to 15 feet. But it was moving wrong, flowing into itself, contracting instead of expanding. As if the fog was being sucked toward a central point somewhere ahead of us. No, behind us. We were traveling backward, so ahead was behind. The first body appeared at 5:03 p.m. It was floating face down in the water, wearing a survival suit identical to ours. Torres spotted it, shouted, and Reeves brought us. Well, we were moving backward, so we passed by it. I got a good look as it slid past our bow. The body was moving. Small movements, limbs twitching, head turning. But it was face down in 38-degree water and had clearly been dead for days based on the bloating. "Did that thing just move?" Torres asked. It had. I'd seen it. We all had. 3 more bodies appeared over the next 20 minutes, all wearing survival suits, all floating face down, all making small movements that dead people shouldn't make. One of them turned its head as we passed, tracking us with eyes that should have been too decomposed to see. "Those suits," Miller said slowly. "They're the same as ours. Same color, same manufacturer logo." He was right. Bright orange with Arctic horizon stenciled on the back in white letters. "We don't have people overboard," Reeves said, but his voice was uncertain. The fog thickened until we could barely see the bow from the bridge. The Arctic horizon continued its backward journey at 12 knots, pulled by a current that defied every law of physics. The only sound was the hull cutting through water and the reversed speech voices crackling from the radio. Torres was the first to notice his watch. "Captain, what time is it?" Reeves checked his watch, checked it again, held it up to his ear. That's not right. What does it say?" 4:47 p.m. "Mine says 4:47 too," Torres said. "But we've been out here for almost an hour." I checked my watch. 4:47 p.m. I looked at the bridge clock. 4:47 p.m. My phone, dead, but the last timestamp before it died was 4:47 p.m. Time had stopped. Or we'd fallen out of time, or something worse that I didn't have words for. The ship appeared at 5:03 p.m., except that was impossible because time was stuck at 4:47 p.m. But there it was, emerging from the fog, a fishing boat, 68 feet long, steel hull, identical to the Arctic horizon in every detail. Because it was the Arctic horizon. We were looking at ourselves, a perfect mirror of our boat traveling forward through the fog while we traveled backward. I could see figures on the other boat's deck, 4 people in survival suits, identical positions to where we stood. "Wave," Reeves said. "Everyone wave." We waved. The figures on the other boat waved, but the timing was wrong. They waved a second before we did, their movements preceding ours. The boats passed within 20 feet of each other. I got a clear look at the person in my position on the other boat's deck. It was me. Exact same face, same suit, same expression of terror. Except my double's eyes were dead. Empty, like looking at a perfect replica with nothing inside. The other Arctic horizon continued forward into the fog and vanished. "What the fuck was that?" Torres screamed. "What the actual fuck?" No one had an answer. We stood in silence, the fog pressing in, the boat traveling backward through impossible water, surrounded by corpses that moved and time that didn't pass. The second ship appeared, then a third, then a fourth. All identical to the Arctic horizon, all traveling forward while we traveled backward, all crewed by dead-eyed versions of ourselves. Some of the ships showed damage, hull breaches, missing sections, one that was actively sinking but somehow still moving. We were seeing iterations of ourselves, past versions, future versions, all existing simultaneously in this place where time didn't work. On the 7th ship, I saw myself die. The boat was burning, flames consuming the superstructure, and through the smoke I could see my double thrashing in the water, survival suit torn open, drowning in 38-degree water. He locked eyes with me as the boats passed, and his expression wasn't fear or pain. It was recognition. He'd seen me too, seen his past self watching his death. Miller broke first. He ran to the rail and jumped. "Miller!" Reeves lunged for him, missed by inches. We watched Miller hit the water, the splash frozen in time for a moment before reality reasserted itself. He surfaced, gasping, then started swimming. Except he was swimming backward, his strokes pulling him away from the direction he was facing. He saw it happening, panicked, swam harder. The current grabbed him and yanked him under. He surfaced 30 feet behind our stern, still moving backward, arms flailing. Then the things beneath the water took him. I thought they were fish, the dark shapes I'd been seeing below the surface, swimming in formation. But when they rose to take Miller, I saw what they really were. Bodies. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All wearing survival suits, all swimming backward in perfect synchronization. They swarmed Miller, pulled him under, and the water turned red. Then the red reversed, flowed back into his body, and he surfaced again, alive, screaming, bleeding wounds appearing in reverse as the blood flowed back into him. Then they took him under again, and this time he didn't surface. "No one else goes in the water," Reeves said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. "We ride this out. We stay on the boat." Ride it out to where? Torres demanded. We're traveling backward through time, or dimensions, or hell, and there are hundreds of us out there, all dead, all moving, and we stay calm and we stay on the boat. The fog lifted at 5:47 p.m., which was still 4:47 p.m. on our watches. What we saw made Torres start laughing, a high, broken sound that didn't stop. Ships, hundreds of them. Thousands. All identical to the Arctic horizon, all traveling in a massive circle, each one offset slightly in time. Some were decades old based on their deterioration, steel hulls rusted through. Some were brand new, some were on fire, some were underwater, but somehow still moving, visible through the clear black water. We were in a graveyard of ourselves, every version of the Arctic horizon that had ever entered this place, all trapped, all traveling in an eternal loop. How long? Torres asked, the laughter dying. How long have we been here? How long have they been here? The oldest ship I could see looked like it had been here for 50 years, rust and decay and hull damage that spoke of decades in the water. But it was still moving, still traveling backward in formation with all the others. We'd been caught in a loop, a current that ran backward through time, trapping ships in an eternal circuit. And based on the deterioration patterns, once you were in, you never left. Reeves tried the engines one more time. They didn't even click. How much fuel do we have? He asked. Full tanks, Torres said. But what's the point? The engines don't work. The heater works. I can feel it running. He was right. The bridge was warm, the heater humming, drawing power from batteries that should have died hours ago. We had heat, we had shelter, we had supplies for 3 weeks, and we had eternity to use them because we were never leaving. That was 8 months ago by my count, though my watch still says 4:47 p.m. We're still on the Arctic horizon, still traveling backward through black water, still passing infinite versions of ourselves. Reeves died 3 months in, heart attack. Torres went mad and jumped 4 months in. I'm alone now, or as alone as you can be when you're surrounded by thousands of iterations of your own ship crewed by corpses that still move. I've seen myself die 47 times. Drowning, mostly. A few fires, one where the ship just breaks apart for no reason, and I watch myself fall into the water in pieces. I don't know why I'm still alive. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I died at 4:47 p.m. on March 17th, and this is what comes after. An eternity traveling backward through water that shouldn't exist, watching infinite versions of my death on loop. I'm writing this on the bridge computer, which still works despite having no power source. I don't know if anyone will ever read it. Don't know if it matters. But if you're fishing out of Valdez, and you find yourself in water that's black as oil, and the fish are swimming backward, and time stops at 4:47 p.m. Turn around immediately, and run your engines full throttle away from that water. Don't let curiosity pull you in. Don't investigate. Don't think you can handle it. Because the current only flows one direction, and it's backward, and once you're in, you're part of the loop forever. I can see another Arctic horizon approaching now, traveling forward while I travel backward. I'll wave. My double will wave back, 1 second too early. And then I'll watch him pass into the fog, toward the moment 8 months from now, when he'll be sitting alone on the bridge, writing this same message, warning someone who'll never read it. The current doesn't end. It just loops. Forever. Story 6. The Talkeetna Voice. My daughter said her first word at 14 months, and 4 years later, she still hasn't said a second one. The word was outside, spoken clearly at 7:43 a.m. on November 3rd, 2019. Emma pointed at the window of our cabin 6 miles outside Talkeetna and said it. Outside. My wife Rachel and I celebrated, like she'd just won the Nobel Prize. We'd been waiting for that first word, doing all the things the pediatrician recommended, reading to her, talking to her constantly, singing songs. And finally, at 14 months, Emma had spoken. She never spoke again. We thought it was selective mutism at first. Some kids talk late. Some go through periods of silence. The pediatrician said not to worry, that Emma would talk when she was ready. But months passed, then years, and that single word remained her only verbal communication. Emma was otherwise completely normal. She understood language, followed complex instructions, responded to questions with nods or shakes, used gestures to communicate. She was bright, engaged, happy, just silent. But here's the thing that none of the doctors could explain. We kept hearing that word. Outside. Not from Emma, from outside. It started 3 weeks after Emma's first word. Rachel woke me at 2:17 a.m., her hand on my shoulder, her voice urgent. "Do you hear that?" I listened. From somewhere beyond our cabin, faint but clear, I heard a child's voice. Outside. The exact same inflection Emma had used, the exact same tone, like a recording played at low volume. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the yard. Nothing. The voice seemed to come from the tree line, 200 yards from our house. I walked halfway there, playing my light across the spruce and birch, seeing nothing but darkness and snow. "Outside," the voice said again, closer now, coming from my left. I spun. The forest was empty. "Outside," from my right this time. I ran back to the cabin and locked the door. Rachel was holding Emma, who was wide awake, staring at the window. "Did you see anything?" Rachel asked. "No, but I heard it. It's saying Emma's word." We reported it to the state troopers the next morning. They sent someone out, a trooper named Wagner, who took our statement seriously and searched the property. He found no tracks, no signs of anyone in the area. He suggested it might be an animal. "Ravens can mimic human speech," he said. "So can some owls." But I knew what I'd heard. It wasn't an animal. It was Emma's voice, Emma's word, coming from something in the forest. It happened again 2 nights later, and 3 nights after that. Always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always the same word, spoken in Emma's voice, coming from different locations around our property. Sometimes close to the cabin, sometimes from deep in the forest. We started recording it. Set up audio equipment, motion-activated cameras, everything we could think of. The audio captured it, Emma's voice, clear as day, saying outside from places she'd never been. The cameras showed nothing, just empty forest. Emma started reacting to it. When the voice spoke, she would go to whatever window was closest and press her face against the glass, breath fogging, staring into the dark. She never seemed scared. Just attentive, like she was listening to someone she recognized. The voice started coming during the day. Always Emma's voice, always that one word. But the locations got closer. What had started 200 yards away in the forest was now 50 yards, then 20. Then right outside our windows, the voice. Crystal clear. "Outside." I called in every expert I could find. Wildlife specialists said no animal makes those sounds. Audio forensics experts confirmed it was a real voice, not electronic, but couldn't explain how it was projecting from multiple locations simultaneously. A linguist at UAF listened to our recordings and said the voice showed no variation, literally identical every time, down to the micro-inflections, like the same moment captured and replayed. "It's impossible," he said. "Human speech has natural variation. Even if someone was saying the same word over and over, there would be tiny differences. This is exact, digitally, exact." On February 7th, 2020, the voice spoke from inside our cabin. Rachel was putting Emma to bed when we heard it. Outside. The voice came from the living room. We were in the bedroom. The living room was empty. I'd been sitting there 30 seconds earlier. But there was Emma's voice, speaking from an empty room. Outside. From the kitchen now. Emma sat bolt upright in bed, tracking the sound with her eyes. She pointed toward the kitchen, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not fear, expectation. Outside, the voice said from the hallway. Right outside Emma's bedroom door. I threw the door open. The hallway was empty. But I could hear it now. Speaking from everywhere and nowhere, Emma's voice echoing through our cabin, each iteration perfectly synchronized. Outside, outside, outside. Emma climbed out of bed and walked to the front door. She stood there, one hand on the handle, looking back at us, waiting. No, Rachel said. Emma, no, you're not going outside. Emma turned the handle. I lunged and grabbed her, pulling her away from the door. She fought, first time she'd ever fought us on anything, struggling with surprising strength, reaching for the door, silent but desperate. The voice outside grew louder, not volume, but quantity. Multiple instances of Emma's voice speaking in perfect unison. Outside, 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 outside. I carried Emma back to her room while Rachel locked and barricaded the front door. Emma didn't cry, didn't make a sound. But she never took her eyes off the door, and her expression was heartbreaking. Like we were keeping her from something she desperately needed. We called 911. The trooper who responded was Wagner again. He heard the voices, couldn't miss them. They were coming from every direction now, sometimes inside the cabin, sometimes out, always saying, outside, in Emma's voice. What the hell is this? He asked, hand on his weapon, scanning the cabin like he expected to find someone. We don't know. It started 4 months ago. It's getting worse. He radioed for backup. While we waited, Emma escaped. I don't know how. We'd locked her in her room, blocked the door. But at 3:47 a.m., I woke to Rachel's scream and found Emma's room empty, her window open to the February night. We found her footprints in the snow, small bare feet, leading into the forest. Following them was easy. She'd walked in a straight line, no deviation, headed northeast into the densest part of the woods. Wagner called in a search team. They arrived with dogs, ATVs, thermal imaging. But Emma's tracks didn't lead to Emma. They led to something else. The clearing was 3 miles from our cabin, a perfectly circular area approximately 80 feet in diameter, where no trees grew. The ground was bare stone, granite exposed by some ancient geological process. Emma's footprints led to the center of the clearing and stopped. She wasn't there, but someone else was. 37 of them, to be exact. Children, all girls, all approximately the same age as Emma, all standing in concentric circles around the center point. They wore various clothing from various eras. I saw dresses from the 1920s, overalls from the 60s, modern winter coats. They stood perfectly still, not shivering despite the 10-degree temperature, all staring at the exact center of the clearing. Outside, one of them said. Then another. Then all of them, speaking in unison, 37 voices creating a harmony that made my teeth hurt. Outside, outside, outside. Each voice was different pitch, different tone. But the timing was identical, the words spoken in perfect synchronization. Wagner reached for his radio. We need child services. We need. Jesus Christ, what is this? The children turned to look at us. All at once, every head rotating in perfect unison, 37 pairs of eyes locking onto us with disturbing precision. Then Emma walked out from behind the last circle of children. She was fine, no frostbite, no injuries, not even cold, despite wearing only her pajamas. She walked to me, took my hand and smiled. Behind her, the children began to walk. Not toward us, away, into the forest, dispersing in different directions, still speaking in unison. Outside, outside, outside. We tried to follow them. The search team fanned out, trying to track where they went. We found nothing. 37 children vanished into the forest without leaving tracks, without making sounds, without trace. The state police investigation lasted 3 months. They identified some of the children from missing persons reports. The oldest case was from 1927, a girl named Elizabeth Cormack, who disappeared near Talkeetna and was never found. The most recent was from 2018, a 4-year-old named Sophie Grant, who'd vanished from her family's cabin 7 miles from ours. All of them had said one word before disappearing. Just one word, spoken clearly, their first or last word depending on their age. All different words. Mama, help, bye, red, snow. 37 children, 37 words. And after they disappeared, people reported hearing those words spoken in the children's voices, coming from the forest, repeating endlessly. Emma wouldn't talk about what happened, still won't talk at all, actually. She's 8 now, and outside remains her only word. She's happy, healthy, does well in school, communicates through writing and gestures. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it. Not just Emma's voice saying, outside, but all of them. 37 children's voices, speaking 37 different words, creating a cacophony that only I seem to hear. Rachel doesn't hear it. Emma's teachers don't hear it. The doctors I've seen don't hear it. Just me. And it's getting closer. What started as distant forest sounds now comes from our yard, from our porch, from inside our house, words whispered from empty rooms. Outside, Mama, help, bye, red, snow. All 37 words, all 37 voices, speaking in rotating sequence. I researched the clearing, found references dating back to Russian exploration, journals mentioning a place where children go silent and voices remain. Indigenous accounts described it as a thin place, somewhere the boundary between worlds was permeable, a place where words had power, where speaking could trap you, bind you to the location. The children are stuck there, I think. Whatever they said, their first word, their last word, whatever word had meaning in that place at that moment, bound them, made them part of it. Their voices repeat forever, calling from between worlds, trying to bring others to the clearing. Emma escaped somehow, or maybe she didn't. Maybe she left part of herself there, and that's why she won't speak. Can't speak. Because if she says another word, it might pull her back. Last week, I found her standing in the clearing at 3 a.m. I'd woken to find her gone, followed her tracks through new snow. She was in the center of the circle, surrounded by those 37 children, all of them holding hands, all of them staring at her. Outside, they said in unison, 37 voices speaking Emma's word. Emma looked at me and shook her head, a warning. I grabbed her and ran, carrying her back through the forest, while behind us the voices grew louder, not just 37 now, but hundreds, maybe thousands, all the children who'd ever been taken to that place, all speaking their words in perfect harmony. We moved to Anchorage the next day, sold the cabin for half its value, didn't explain to the buyers what they were getting. Maybe nothing happens to them. Maybe it only happens if you have a child who speaks in that place. But I still hear the voices, in our new house, in the city, surrounded by people and lights and civilization. I hear Emma's voice saying, outside, coming from our backyard, our garage, our basement, coming from my daughter's closet while she sleeps. And yesterday, Emma wrote me a note. First time she's communicated anything about that night. The note said, "They want me to say the second word. When I do, I go back. I'm trying not to say it, but it's getting hard to hold it in. The word wants to be spoken." I asked her what the word was. She wouldn't write it down, just shook her head, fear clear in her eyes. But last night I heard her talking in her sleep, not outside. A new word whispered so quietly I almost missed it. Inside. And this morning, when I went to check on her, Emma was standing at her window, staring out at our backyard. In the fresh snow, I could see footprints. Small, bare feet, 37 different sets of tracks, all leading to our back door, all leading inside. Story 7. The Whittier floor. The building had 47 floors, and I'd been living on the 53rd for 6 weeks before I realized the math didn't work. Biggish Towers in Whittier, Alaska, is a relic of Cold War paranoia, a 14-story apartment complex that houses most of the town's 218 residents. When I moved in last October, the landlord told me I'd be on the 9th floor. Apartment 912. $900 a month, utilities included. Cheap because Whittier is the kind of place you move to when you're running from something. I was running from a divorce and a drinking problem, in that order. Whittier seemed perfect, isolated, quiet, a place where I could work remotely and avoid human interaction for months at a time. The fact that the entire population lived in one building was a plus. Everything under one roof, post office, store, school, church. I could go weeks without stepping outside. The first 5 weeks were exactly what I needed. I worked my tech support job, avoided my neighbors, and slowly remembered what it felt like to be sober. My apartment was small but functional, 600 square feet, west-facing windows looking at Prince William Sound, walls thin enough to hear my neighbors, but not enough to make out words. The problem started on November 18th, 2023, when I got stuck in the elevator. I'd pressed the button for the 9th floor, but the elevator kept rising. Past 9, past 10. The digital display kept counting. 11, 12, 13, 14, then 15. The building only has 14 floors. At 23, the elevator stopped. The doors opened onto a hallway I'd never seen. Same institutional carpet, same fluorescent lights, same layout as my floor. But different. The walls were a shade darker. The air smelled wrong, stale and old, like a room that hadn't been ventilated in decades. I stepped out, thinking I'd misread the display. Apartment doors lined the hallway, 2301, 2302, continuing down to 2328 at the far end. Each door was identical to the ones on my floor, but these had something extra. Small plaques next to each door frame, the kind that might hold names or numbers. Except they didn't hold names. They held dates. The plaque next to 2301 read 1987, 1991, 2302, 1991, 1997, 2303, 1997, 2004. I walked the length of the hallway, checking every plaque. They were all date ranges, sequential, ending with 2328, 2044, 2051. Dates that hadn't happened yet. I tried apartment 2312, the same number as mine but 23 floors up. The door was unlocked. Inside was a perfect replica of my apartment. Same layout, same furniture. But everything was aged. The couch I'd bought new 6 weeks ago was worn and stained. The TV was an older model. Personal items scattered around belonged to me. My coffee mug with the chip on the handle, my laptop case, my shoes by the door. But they were versions from different time periods. The laptop case was one I'd thrown away 3 years ago. The shoes were from high school, a pair of Adidas I'd loved and worn until they fell apart. On the kitchen counter, I found a wallet. My wallet. I opened it and saw my driver's license, but the photo was me at 17. The issue date was 2003, 20 years ago. I backed out of the apartment and returned to the elevator. I pressed button 9. The elevator descended, counting down 22, 21, 20, and on down to 9. The doors opened onto my floor, the real 9th floor. I went to my apartment and locked myself inside. I told myself I'd hallucinated the whole thing, that I'd fallen asleep in the elevator and dreamed it. But when I checked my pocket, I was still holding the wallet. My wallet from 2003, with my teenage face staring out from a license that should have been destroyed 2 decades ago. I didn't use the elevator for 3 days, took the stairs exclusively, counting floors carefully to make sure I always ended up on 9. But on the 4th day, I had to use it. I was carrying groceries, too many bags to manage the stairs. I pressed 9. The elevator went to 29. The 29th floor was different from the 23rd. The carpet was newer. The lights were LEDs instead of fluorescent, and the apartment doors had names instead of dates. My name. Every single door. Aaron Mitchell. Different styles, different handwriting, but my name on every plaque from 2901 to 2928. I tried my apartment number. Inside was another version of my space, but this one was lived in. Current. The laptop on the desk was my current model. The clothes in the bedroom were what I'd wear now. And there were things I hadn't bought yet. A new mattress, the one I'd been looking at online but hadn't purchased. A coffee maker I'd put in my Amazon cart but not checked out. Books I'd been meaning to read but hadn't ordered. On the desk was a journal, my handwriting. I opened to the most recent entry, dated November 21st, 2023. 3 days from now. Figured out the pattern. Each floor is a version of my life. Past floors are where I've been. Future floors are where I'm going. But the math doesn't work. The building only has 14 floors, but I've been to 29 different versions of the 9th floor. The space doesn't exist. The floors don't exist. But I keep finding them. I think I'm stuck. I think when I moved to Beggish Towers, I didn't move into a building. I moved into myself, into all my possible lives. And now I can't find my way back to the real 9th floor because I don't know which one is real. I slammed the journal shut and ran for the elevator. Hit button 9, then hit it 17 more times. The elevator descended normally, 28, 27, 26, down to 9. But when the doors opened, I didn't recognize the hallway. Same layout, same carpet. But wrong. The walls were beige instead of cream. The light fixtures were different. And the apartment numbers were strange. 9.101, 9.102, continuing down the hall. Decimal floors. I was on the 9th floor, but a different version. A version between whole numbers. I tried to go down further. Pressed button 8. The elevator took me to floor 8.7. Pressed 7. Got 7.3. The building was fracturing into infinite variations, each floor splitting into decimal versions, and I was lost in the subdivisions. Over the next week, I tried everything. I took the stairs, but they led to fractional floors too. 9.5 between 9 and 10, 14.2 between 14 and 15. I tried going outside, but the exterior doors led to other floors, not outside. I'd open the door marked exit and find myself in a hallway labeled floor 36 or floor 2.8 or floor -4. Negative floors existed below ground. I found -12, -27. They were darker, colder. The apartments had my name on plaques, but the dates were all in the past. -12 had an apartment full of my childhood toys. -27 had my parents' furniture from when I was a baby. I found floor 47 on my 6th day. Lost. the highest I'd been. The future versions got stranger the higher I went. Floor 47 had my apartment filled with medical equipment, a hospital bed, oxygen tanks, prescriptions. The dates on the pill bottles were 2051. I'd be 67 years old. In the bathroom mirror, I saw him. Me. 67 years old. Gaunt and pale, oxygen cannula in his nose. He stared back at me with recognition. "You're early," old me said. His voice was mine, but rougher, damaged by time. "You're not supposed to be here for 28 years. How do I get out?" "Out of what?" "The building." "You are out. This is outside. Every floor is outside. The building is you, remember? All your possible yous, stacked on top of each other. That's not possible. You moved to Whittier to escape. You got your wish. You escaped everything, including reality." Old me smiled, showing missing teeth. "Big-ish Towers is a trap. Always has been. Why do you think they built it during the Cold War? Why do you think most of Whittier lives in one building? It's not convenience. It's containment." "Containment of what?" "People who fall through cracks in their lives. People running from something. The building catches them, folds them into itself. You become part of the structure. Another floor, another version. And eventually, you can't remember which version was real. I'm on the 9th floor, apartment 912. That's real." "Which 9th floor? The original? 9.3, 9.999. There are infinite nines, Aaron. Infinite versions between every floor. You've been wandering them for 6 weeks. I've only been lost for 6 days." Old me laughed. "Time works differently in the between floors. You've been here much longer than you think. Check your phone." I pulled it out. The date read March 7th, 2024. 4 months had passed since I'd gotten stuck in the elevator, but I'd only experienced days. "The building digests you slowly," old me said. "Spreads you across floors and years. Eventually, you're so fragmented that you forget which piece is original. Was I ever real? Are you real? We're both versions of Aaron Mitchell living in Beggish Towers, but maybe neither of us is the first one." I ran, back to the elevator, down to floor 9. But there were hundreds of floor 9s now, maybe thousands. I stopped at 9.426, my apartment, my furniture, my life, but slightly wrong. The couch faced the wrong direction. The TV was mounted on the wrong wall. I tried 9.513. Closer. Everything was almost right. Almost my life. But the photos on the wall showed events I didn't remember. Vacations I never took. People I'd never met. I spent weeks searching. Floor 9.892, 9.991, 9.99999. Each one closer to right, but never quite correct. I was approaching the original 9th floor asymptotically, getting infinitely close but never reaching it. On floor 9.999999993, I found a version of myself sitting at the kitchen table. He looked up when I entered. "You too?" he asked. "How many of us are there?" "I've met 16. We're all looking for the original floor, the real 9. But I don't think it exists anymore. I think when we got trapped, the original version collapsed. Spread across infinite decimal floors. We're fragments now, pieces of a whole that doesn't exist." I sat down across from him. We looked identical, sounded identical. For all I knew, we were identical, perfect copies searching for an original that had been deleted. "There's a theory," other me said. "Some of us think there's a pattern. The floors aren't random. They're organized by decisions. Each floor represents a choice, a fork in your life. If you can trace back all your decisions, find the sequence that led you here, you can navigate back to the root." "How?" Count your regrets. I didn't understand at first, but other me explained, every floor represents a choice, and wrong choices create fractional floors. Decimal floors between integers. If you can identify your wrong choices, you can subtract them, narrow down the possibilities, approach the original. So I started counting. The divorce, wrong choice. Moving to Whittier, wrong choice. The drinking, wrong choice. Dozens of decisions, hundreds, each one a fractional floor. I calculated backward, subtracting my regrets, navigating to earlier versions. Floor 8.32. Before I moved to Whittier. Floor 6.7. Before I married. Floor 3.1. Childhood. Floor 0.9. Infant. I went negative. Before birth. The floors showed lives I could have lived, choices my parents made that led to my existence. Negative 2.4. A different school district. Negative 5.8. My parents never met. At floor negative 8.0, I found nothing. An empty hallway, no apartments, just blank walls and silence. The root floor. The point before choices, before fracturing. I stood in the emptiness, understanding finally what had happened. I'd been searching for the original Aaron Mitchell, the real version, but there wasn't one. There never had been. I was the sum of infinite choices, infinite floors, and removing them one by one didn't reveal a root. It revealed nothing. I was built from decisions. Remove the decisions, and nothing remains. I took the elevator up, back to floor 9. But I didn't try to find the original anymore. I picked one at random, 9.627, and decided it was real. Close enough to what I remembered, different enough that the gaps could be blamed on memory. I've been living here for 3 months now, or 3 years, or 3 days. Time doesn't work right in the between floors. My calendar says it's January, but outside the window, it's perpetually November. The sun sets at 4:47 p.m. every day, exactly the moment I first got stuck in the elevator. Sometimes I meet other versions of myself in the hall. We don't talk, just nod and keep walking. We're all living in our chosen floors, pretending they're real, pretending we found our way home. Sometimes I take the elevator. Hit random buttons. Floor 33. Floor negative 17. Floor 12.9999999. Each one holds a version of my life. Past, future, possible, impossible. I visit them like museums, looking at the person I was, or might have been, or could never be. And sometimes late at night I hear knocking. Other me's trapped in their floors, trying to find the way out. I don't answer. Can't help them. We're all lost in the same building, searching for the same exit, and none of us remember what we were before we started searching. The building has 47 floors, according to the blueprints. But I've been to floor 932. I've been to floor negative 6012. I've been to floor 9.99999, 9999999, 99999999993, and I still haven't found the real 9th floor. Starting to think it found me instead. The building didn't trap me. I built it. Every floor, every version, every fractional possibility. I'm not lost in Begich Towers. I am Begich Towers. And I have infinite rooms for anyone else who's running from something. The elevator's always working. Just press your floor and see where you end up. You might be there already. Story 8. The Brooks Range Reflection. The thing in the ice had my face, but it was smiling wrong. Too wide, too many teeth. And that's when I knew we'd drilled too deep. I was part of a 4-person climate research team studying permafrost degradation in the Brooks Range, 70 miles north of the Arctic Circle. December 8, 2023. Temperature minus 52 degrees. Wind chill minus 83. The kind of cold that turns exposed skin black in 90 seconds. We'd been drilling core samples for 3 weeks, extracting cylinders of ice and frozen soil that contained climate data going back thousands of years. My job was photography and documentation. I'd take images of each core, catalog the depth, note any anomalies. The anomaly appeared at 3,890 feet. Dr. Sarah Voss pulled up the core and called me over. "David, you need to see this." The ice was clear as glass, and inside it, preserved in perfect detail, was a human face. My face. Not similar. Not kind of looks like me. Exact. Every detail matched. The scar on my left eyebrow from a childhood fall, the slight crook in my nose, the birthmark on my right temple. It was me, frozen in ice that was approximately 38,000 years old. "That's impossible," I said. "It's not you," Dr. Voss said, but her voice was uncertain. "It's a coincidence, an incredible coincidence, but—" The face in the ice opened its eyes. I stumbled backward. Dr. Voss dropped the core sample. It hit the ground and the ice shattered into 17 pieces. But the face remained intact. In the largest fragment, my frozen double's eyes tracked toward me, and its mouth moved, forming words with no sound. I watched my own lips shape a sentence I couldn't hear. Did it just... Dr. Voss didn't finish the question. Yes. We called in the other 2 team members, Dr. Henry Chen, our lead researcher, and Marcus Webb, our logistics coordinator. They both reacted to the face the same way. Shock, followed by denial, followed by the unavoidable recognition that it looked exactly like me. "We need to document this," Chen said, already setting up recording equipment. "David, stand next to the sample. I want comparative photographs." I posed next to my frozen double. Chen took 47 photographs from every angle. In every image, the resemblance was undeniable. We looked like identical twins, except one of us was frozen in 38,000-year-old ice. That night, the face appeared in other cores. We'd extracted 7 more samples after finding the first one, drilling deeper into the permafrost. At 2:17 a.m., Marcus was cataloging the day's samples when he called out, Guys, we have a problem. All 7 cores contained faces, not just my face, all of our faces. Dr. Voss at 4,000 feet, Chen at 4,200, Marcus at 4,500, and more faces I didn't recognize, dozens of them, frozen at various depths, all showing signs of life. Eyes open, mouths moving. Some were screaming silently. Others smiled with too many teeth. "We're stopping the operation," Chen said. "We extract what we've got and leave tomorrow." But the storm hit at 4:33 a.m., and tomorrow became impossible. The Brooks Range gets storms that can trap you for weeks, whiteout conditions, winds strong enough to tear apart our prefab shelter. We battened down and waited, surrounded by ice cores containing our frozen doubles. The faces started changing at hour 6 of the storm. I was monitoring weather data when I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. The ice sample containing my face, the first one we'd found, was still sitting on the lab table, partially melted now. My double's expression had changed. It was no longer just staring. It was grinning. That smile. Too wide. The corners of the mouth extending too far, revealing teeth that didn't look quite human. Too sharp. Too many molars. "Dr. Voss," I called out, "the samples are changing." She came over and stopped dead. That's not the same face. It wasn't. The resemblance was still there, but subtle wrongness had crept in. The proportions were slightly off. The eyes were too far apart. The nose was too symmetrical. It was me run through a filter that almost got the details right, but missed something fundamental. We checked the other cores. They were all changing. Dr. Voss's double now had fingers that were too long. Chen's face had eyes that didn't quite align. Marcus's showed something moving under the skin, subtle ripples like there were worms beneath the frozen flesh. "The ice is melting," Marcus said. "Core integrity is failing." He was right. Despite the storm, despite the minus 52-degree temperature outside, the shelter was warm. Too warm. 78 degrees according to our thermometer, even though our heater was set to 65 and shouldn't have been able to reach that high. The ice was generating heat as it melted. Impossible, but measurable. I held a thermometer next to my frozen double. 89 degrees Fahrenheit, coming from the ice itself. "We need to get these outside," Chen said. "If they fully thaw." My double's hand punched through the ice. Not cracked through, not melted through. Punched. I watched the frozen hand become liquid for just a second, pass through solid ice like it was water, then resolidify on our side, fingers grasping air. It grabbed my wrist. The touch was cold beyond anything I'd experienced. Colder than the Brooks Range in December. Colder than liquid nitrogen. The skin on my wrist flash froze, ice crystals forming instantly, spreading up my arm. I yanked free, leaving skin behind, frozen to my double's palm. The hand retreated back into the ice, taking my frozen skin with it. And in the core sample, I watched my double raise my skin to its mouth and eat it. "Everyone out!" Chen shouted. "Leave everything! Go!" We ran for the door. Behind us, I heard ice shattering, all the cores breaking simultaneously, whatever was inside them forcing their way out. The storm outside was dying. In the span of 6 hours, it had gone from whiteout to merely bad. We could see the tundra, the mountains, our vehicles 200 yards away. We ran through minus 52-degree air in nothing but our indoor clothes, knowing frostbite was inevitable but preferable to whatever was in the shelter. We made it 50 yards before Marcus stopped running. "My feet are stuck," he said. I looked down. His boots had frozen to the ground mid-step, encased in ice that spread from the soles up his legs. He tried to pull free, but the ice held firm, growing faster than he could break it. "Help me!" Dr. Voss and I grabbed his arms and pulled. The ice reached his knees, then his thighs. We pulled harder, and Marcus's legs came free of his boots, leaving them encased while he stumbled forward. We kept running. Behind us, the shelter was opening, not the door, the walls themselves, peeling apart like a flower blooming, revealing the interior. And inside, our doubles were emerging from melted ice. 4 figures that looked like us, but wrong. Their movements were too fluid, bodies bending at angles that suggested extra joints. They walked on legs that bent backward. Their faces cycled through expressions too fast, smiling and frowning, and showing rage and joy in rapid sequence, like they were learning emotions from a catalog. My double called out in my voice, "David, wait! You forgot something!" It held up my frozen skin, waving it like a flag. We reached the vehicles. Chen's hands shook so badly he dropped the keys 3 times before getting the door open. We piled into the truck, me, Chen, Voss, Marcus, and Chen turned the key. Nothing. He tried again. The engine didn't even turn over. Dead, despite having worked perfectly 6 hours ago. In the rearview mirror, our doubles approached. Walking at a casual pace, unbothered by the cold, their wrong-angled bodies moving with disturbing grace. "Other truck," Marcus gasped. His feet were black with frostbite, his legs blue up to his knees. "Try the other truck." We abandoned the first vehicle and ran to the second. This one started, diesel engine roaring to life. Chen threw it in gear and gunned the accelerator. The doubles didn't chase us. They stood watching as we drove away across the tundra, 4 figures with our faces waving goodbye in perfect synchronization. We made it to Wiseman, the nearest village, in 3 hours. Marcus lost his feet, amputation at the ankles, frostbite too severe to save anything below. Dr. Voss lost 2 fingers. I lost most of the skin on my right forearm, where my double had grabbed me. We reported everything to the authorities. They sent a team back to the site 3 days later and found nothing. The shelter was intact. The core samples were neatly stored, showing no signs of melting or damage. The photographs I'd taken of my frozen double were corrupted, blank images, like the camera had never captured anything. But the drill site was different. Where we'd been extracting cores, they found a hole, not the small borehole from our equipment, a massive shaft 15 feet in diameter descending into the permafrost. They sent cameras down. At 4,000 feet, they found it. A chamber, circular, 200 feet across. And inside, perfectly preserved in ice, were hundreds of figures. Thousands. All frozen in various poses, all with faces that matched people. Some matched historical figures. They found Elvis Presley, Amelia Earhart, Jimmy Hoffa. Others matched people who were still alive, celebrities, politicians, random civilians. And in the center of the chamber, they found 4 more. Us, Chen, Voss, Marcus, and me. Frozen in ice, dead. Our corpses were estimated to be 38,000 years old. The site was classified immediately. National security, they said. Ongoing investigation. We were paid substantial consulting fees and required to sign non-disclosure agreements that carried federal prison time for violations. But I did my own research. Found geological surveys from the area going back to the 50s. Every research team that had drilled in that location reported the same thing. Faces in the ice. Faces that matched team members. And every team reported equipment failures or contamination that ended their research. And every team had at least one member who went missing afterward. Dr. Chen disappeared 6 weeks after we returned, left his apartment one morning, and never arrived at work. They found his car parked at a trailhead in the Brooks Range, 200 miles from where we'd been drilling. No sign of Chen. But in the snow next to his car, they found footprints. His footprints, leading away from the vehicle. Except there were 2 sets, identical in size and pattern, walking side by side. Like Chen had met his double, like they'd walked into the wilderness together. Dr. Voss sees things in reflections. She told me about it 2 months ago, called me at 3 a.m., her voice shaking. She sees her double in every reflective surface, windows, mirrors, puddles. It waves at her, smiles with too many teeth. Sometimes it mouths words. Come back, we're waiting. You left something behind. Marcus can't feel the cold anymore. It's a medical impossibility. Nerve damage from frostbite should have made his stumps hypersensitive to temperature. But he reports feeling nothing. Room temperature and -50 feel the same to him. Yesterday he called me and said his reflection in the bathroom mirror wasn't matching his movements. Said it was doing things independently, reaching for the mirror from the other side. And me, I'm cold. Always. My body temperature has been dropping steadily since we left the Brooks Range. Started at 98.6. Now I'm at 94.2. The doctors can't explain it, can't stop it. They're worried that if it drops below 90, my organs will start shutting down. But I'm not worried. I know what's happening. We didn't leave our doubles behind in the Brooks Range. We brought them with us. They're inside us now, replacing us cell by cell, degree by degree. The ice preserved them for 38,000 years, and we set them free when we drilled too deep. They're patient. They're learning, watching through our eyes, listening through our ears, practicing our movements and expressions. And when they've learned enough, when they've copied every detail perfectly, They'll finish the replacement. I saw my double yesterday. Not in ice, not in a reflection. Standing outside my apartment building at 2 a.m., looking up at my window, wearing my clothes, having my face, but grinning with that wrong smile, too wide, too many teeth. It waved. I didn't wave back. But this morning, I found a photograph on my phone, a selfie I don't remember taking. Me, smiling at the camera, except the smile is too wide, and there are too many teeth. And my reflection in the bathroom mirror is now a second behind my actual movements. I'm 93.8 degrees today, 93.4, 93. I can feel myself getting colder, and I'm starting to forget which one is real, the warm David who drilled into the permafrost, or the cold David who was frozen there, waiting 38,000 years to be found. The ice remembers, and soon, so will I.